You're listening to Underground USA News.
Thursday, August 28, 2025. The U.S. economy demonstrated a strong recovery in the second quarter of 2025, with real GDP growing at an annual rate of 3.3%, a significant rebound from the first quarter's 0.5% decline, according to the U.S. Bureau of Economic Analysis. This growth, revised upward from an initial 3.0% estimate, was driven by a decrease in imports and increased consumer spending, though tempered by reductions in investment and exports. The data reflects resilience in the face of ongoing economic uncertainties, including trade policy challenges, and suggests a positive trajectory for American businesses and households. However, concerns linger about the sustainability of this growth amidst global trade tensions and domestic policy shifts. Washington, D.C. Mayor Muriel Bowser has publicly credited President Trump's federal law enforcement surge for a notable decline in violent crime, including an 87% drop in carjackings since the federalization of the city's police force on August 11, 2025, while expressing initial concerns about the unsettling and unprecedented takeover. Bowser emphasized the effectiveness of the increased federal presence, which has bolstered local police efforts and led to over 630 arrests, including 250 undocumented immigrants and the seizure of 53 firearms. Despite her cooperative stance, Bowser remains cautious, advocating for community trust in law enforcement and expressing concerns about federal overreach, particularly regarding National Guard deployments from other states. This marks a shift from her previous confrontational approach during Trump's first term, reflecting a pragmatic response to the administration's focus on restoring safety in the nation's capital. The Trump administration has escalated its fight to freeze $12 billion in foreign aid, filing an application with the U.S. Supreme Court on August 26, 2025, to suspend a lower court order that prevents the pause of these funds, arguing that the district court overstepped its authority by acting as an overseer of executive spending decisions. This move follows President Trump's Inauguration Day executive order, imposing a 90-day pause on all foreign aid, which was challenged by nonprofits like the AIDS Vaccine Advocacy Coalition and Journalism Development Network, claiming the freeze violates federal law and the Constitution. A previous Supreme Court ruling in March 2025 rejected a similar request to freeze $2 billion for completed work, with a 5-4 decision highlighting judicial oversight concerns. Though the administration's broader policy to realign foreign aid with its agenda remains intact, critics argue this legal tug-of-war risks delaying critical humanitarian programs, while supporters see it as a necessary step to curb wasteful spending and prioritize American interests. In a heightened display of vigilance, the U.S. military scrambled fighter jets, including F-16s and an E-3 Sentry, to intercept a Russian IL-20 reconnaissance aircraft in the Alaskan Air Defense Identification Zone on August 27, 2025, marking the fourth such incident in less than a week. The North American Aerospace Defense Command reported that the Russian plane, a Cold War-era spy aircraft, remained in international airspace and posed no immediate threat, a pattern consistent with prior intercepts on August 20th, 21st, and 24th. These repeated incursions, while not uncommon, underscore ongoing tensions and the need for robust national defense measures to monitor foreign military activity near U.S. borders. NORAD's layered defense network continues to ensure swift responses to safeguard North American airspace. U.S. District Judge Kathleen Williams, an Obama appointee, has ordered a significant rollback of operations at Florida's Alligator Alcatraz migrant detention facility, ruling that the state and federal governments failed to conduct required environmental reviews before constructing the center in the ecologically sensitive Everglades. The decision, which mandates the removal of infrastructure like fencing and generators within 60 days and bars new detainees, is seen as a blow to the Trump administration and Governor Ron DeSantis, who championed the facility as a model for immigration enforcement. Critics argue the ruling prioritizes environmental concerns over border security, while supporters, including environmental groups and the Miccosukee tribe, hail it as a victory for preserving the Everglades' fragile ecosystem. The state has appealed, signaling a continued legal battle over the facility's future. in a decisive step to safeguard American national security and curb long-standing abuses in the immigration system. The Trump administration's Department of Homeland Security has unveiled a proposed rule to replace the open-ended duration of status framework with fixed admission periods for F1 student visas, J1 exchange visitor visas, and I-visas for foreign media representatives, limiting stays to up to 4 years for students and exchanges, or 240 days for media personnel, before requiring extensions through U.S. citizenship and immigration services, a measure that would enable more rigorous oversight and deter fraud after years of lax enforcement under prior regimes that allowed nearly 77,000 F1 students to linger in student status for over a decade while posing risks to public safety and taxpayer resources. This revival of a 2020 initiative, now advancing with public comments open for 30 days following its Federal Register publication on August 28, 2025, addresses the explosive growth in visa admissions, over 1.6 million F1 students and 500,000 J1 visitors in 2023 alone, by aligning these categories with other non-immigrant programs, reducing post-study grace periods from 60 to 30 days, restricting mid-program changes for graduate students, and imposing shorter limits on nationals from high overstay or terrorism-linked countries, ultimately reinforcing the temporary intent of these visas and protecting U.S. citizens from the vulnerabilities exploited by bad actors, including espionage concerns tied to foreign adversaries. Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. has announced significant reforms for the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, labeling the agency as troubled and in need of a return to rigorous evidence-based science. This follows the reported dismissal of CDC Director Susan Monterez, who has refused to step down, citing her commitment to scientific integrity and resistance to what her legal team calls unscientific directives from Kennedy. The clash has sparked resignations from several top CDC officials who express concerns over Kennedy's vaccine policies and leadership approach, while Kennedy insists on aligning the agency with President Trump's agenda to restore public trust. Critics argue this turmoil risks undermining public health infrastructure, while supporters see it as a necessary shakeup to address long-standing issues within the CDC. In a horrifying assault on faith and family values, 23-year-old Robin Westman, a trans-identified male formerly known as Robert, unleashed a barrage of gunfire through the stained glass windows of Annunciation Catholic Church in South Minneapolis during a morning mass on August 27, 2025, killing 2 innocent children aged 8 and 10, while injuring 17 others, including 14 more youngsters, in what authorities describe as a deliberate act of cowardice against worshippers. Westman, who legally changed his name in 2019 amid his gender identification, and whose mother once worked at the very school he targeted, ended his own life in the church parking lot after firing a rifle, shotgun and pistol scrawled with inflammatory messages like "Kill Donald Trump," "Where is your God?" and references to past mass shooters, as revealed in a chilling, now-deleted YouTube manifesto video that included suicidal ramblings, anti-Christian targets, and anti-Semitic phrases such as "Burn Israel" and "6 million was not enough," underscoring yet another tragic example of how radical ideologies and unchecked personal turmoil can erupt into violence against traditional American institutions like the church, prompting President Trump to order flags at half-staff in the FBI to probe it as domestic terrorism and a hate crime targeting Catholics. The FBI, led by Director Kash Patel, is investigating the attack as an act of domestic terrorism and a hate crime targeting Catholics, citing the disturbing social media content, including the manifesto and videos with anti-Catholic and anti-Trump sentiments. On Monday, August 25, 2025, Bratton Dean Wilkinson, a 36-year-old U.S. citizen, was arrested after allegedly threatening to detonate a bomb at the U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Dallas field office, prompting a swift law enforcement response and a temporary shelter-in-place order. Authorities report that Wilkinson approached the facility around 6:37 p.m., claiming to have a bomb in his backpack and displaying what he said was a detonator on his wrist, leading to his detention by Dallas police and charges of making terroristic threats and false reporting to induce an emergency response. The incident, which occurred amid heightened tensions and reported attacks on ICE facilities, has intensified calls for stronger security measures to protect federal immigration officers and facilities from such threats. The U.S. Attorney's Office in the Northern District of Texas is considering federal charges reflecting the seriousness of this disruption to public safety and immigration enforcement operations. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer, a Republican from Kentucky, has launched an investigation into Wikipedia focusing on allegations of bias and potential coordination with external entities to suppress conservative voices. The probe examines whether Wikipedia's content moderation practices unfairly target conservative viewpoints, and if the platform has collaborated with government or corporate actors to censor information. Comer's inquiry, prompted by concerns over Wikipedia's influence as a widely used information source, seeks to ensure transparency and fairness in how the platform shapes public discourse. This investigation underscores growing concerns about the impartiality of online information gatekeepers and their impact on free speech. A shadowy initiative backed by the liberal 1630 Fund is reportedly paying high-profile social media influencers up to $8,000 monthly to promote Democrat messaging, raising serious ethical and legal concerns about undisclosed political funding. The program, operated through Chorus, a nonprofit arm of a liberal influencer marketing platform, imposes strict secrecy clauses and content restrictions preventing influencers from acknowledging payments or criticizing Democrat figures without approval. This covert operation, involving influencers with millions of followers, aims to manipulate public opinion while evading transparency requirements, highlighting a troubling trend in modern political strategy that undermines open discourse. Critics argue this tactic mirrors propaganda, potentially violating campaign finance laws, and exposes the Democrats' struggle to organically engage online audiences after recent electoral setbacks. The Trump administration, led by Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy, announced on August 27, 2025, that the Department of Transportation will assume management of Washington, D.C.'s Union Station, a key transportation hub that has fallen into disrepair and become a hotspot for crime and homelessness. The decision, part of a broader effort to enhance security and beautify the nation's capital, involves renegotiating agreements with Amtrak and the Union Station Redevelopment Corporation to leverage commercial opportunities and fund critical upgrades like elevators, lighting, and security systems. Duffy emphasized the goal of transforming Union Station into a world-class transit hub, aligning with President Trump's vision to make the capital great again, while shelving a costly $10 billion expansion plan. This federal intervention, supported by National Guard presence, reflects a commitment to practical governance and public safety, though some local officials and residents question the extent of federal overreach. A Chinese national and former employee of the University of Texas MD Anderson Cancer Center has been charged with stealing federally funded research and attempting to smuggle it to China, raising concerns about intellectual property theft and national security. The researcher, who entered the U.S. on a J-1 visa for a postdoctoral position, allegedly sought to transfer sensitive research to his home country, prompting scrutiny of foreign influence in American academic institutions. This case follows a pattern of similar incidents, including a 2020 guilty plea by a researcher for stealing trade secrets from an Ohio children's hospital, and a 2019 arrest in Boston for smuggling biological samples. Such actions underscore the need for vigilance in protecting U.S. innovation, while ensuring fairness in addressing these complex issues. The Food and Drug Administration has revoked the emergency use authorization for COVID-19 vaccines, a move announced by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert F. Kennedy Jr. on August 27, 2025, signaling a significant shift in federal health policy. This decision ends broad mandates once enforced during the Biden administration and restricts vaccine access primarily to high-risk groups such as those over 65 or with underlying conditions, while limiting availability for healthy children under 5. The Moderna vaccine is approved for children as young as 6 months with specific health risks, but Pfizer's vaccine, previously available for this age group, now faces barriers. Critics, including FDA officials like Marty Makary and Vin Prasad, argue the risks of vaccines outweigh benefits for healthy children, citing low uptake and insufficient clinical data for updated formulations. This action fulfills campaign promises to prioritize science, safety, and individual choice, though it raises concerns about reduced vaccine access for vulnerable populations. A recent report reveals that the National Education Association and American Federation of Teachers, the two largest U.S. teachers' unions, have collectively donated over $43.5 million since 2022 to progressive organizations including groups like the Trevor Project, Gender Inclusivity LLC, and the Democratic Governors Association, according to Defending Education. Critics argue this substantial funding, which includes $9.3 million to the For Our Future Action Fund, prioritizes political activism over classroom needs, especially as the Trump administration moves to reduce federal education funding and eliminate the Department of Education. NEA President Becky Pringle has defended the union's actions, claiming they protect students and communities, but detractors, including defending EAT's Ryan Staley, assert that such spending undermines core educational goals like improving reading and math skills. The Trump administration has made significant progress in reducing taxpayer-funded animal testing, reversing policies from the Biden era that entrenched such practices. According to reports, the administration has canceled experiments, facilitated the adoption of test animals, and set new deadlines to phase out certain types of research, aligning with a broader push for government efficiency and accountability. The White Coat Waste Project has praised these moves, noting the Pentagon's ban on experiments involving dogs and cats, the EPA's closure of in-house animal labs, and cuts to funding for controversial foreign lab experiments. However, critics argue that the National Institutes of Health continues to fund projects involving animal testing, highlighting ongoing challenges in fully eliminating such practices. These efforts reflect a commitment to prioritizing fiscal responsibility and ethical consideration in federal spending, though resistance from some agencies persists. A surge in sophisticated money laundering operations linked to Chinese entities has been uncovered, with billions of dollars illicitly funneled through major U.S. banks, exploiting vulnerabilities in the financial system. Criminal networks, often tied to drug trafficking and organized crime, are using complex schemes involving cryptocurrency and trade-based laundering to obscure the origins of their funds, posing significant challenges to U.S. regulatory efforts. Federal authorities, including the Treasury Department, are intensifying scrutiny and pushing for stronger compliance measures to curb these activities, which threaten national security and economic stability. The scale of the issue underscores the need for robust oversight to protect American financial institutions from being unwitting conduits for illicit funds. Russia launched its second-largest attack on Kyiv since the onset of the Ukraine conflict, killing at least 18 people, including children, and damaging diplomatic missions of the EU and UK, among others, in a barrage of ballistic and cruise missiles. The assault, which targeted residential areas and critical infrastructure, was described by Ukraine's foreign ministry as barbaric, with embassies from Albania, Argentina, North Macedonia, Palestine, Portugal, and Montenegro also sustaining damage. Moscow claimed the strikes were retaliation for Ukraine's use of Western-supplied Atacams and Storm Shadow missiles on Russian territory, specifically targeting Ukraine's Secret Service control room and other strategic sites. This escalation, coupled with Russia's warnings of further hypersonic missile use, underscores the intensifying conflict and the growing risk of broader geopolitical consequences, particularly as NATO and Western leaders grapple with how to respond without further inflaming tensions. U.S. and European officials are expressing growing concern over Russian surveillance drones, or those operated by proxies monitoring routes used to transport American military supplies through eastern Germany. These flights, which collect intelligence potentially aiding Russia's sabotage efforts and its war in Ukraine, highlight the ongoing challenge of countering Moscow's aggressive tactics. While Russian sabotage activities, such as warehouse fires in Britain and attacks on infrastructure in Norway, have reportedly declined this year, the drone operations signal a persistent threat to Western support for Kyiv. Discussions between U.S. and German authorities have intensified, particularly following the arrest of 3 Ukrainian men in May linked to a Russia-backed plot, underscoring the need for heightened vigilance to protect critical supply lines. Denmark's Foreign Minister Lars Løkke Rasmussen summoned the U.S. chargé d'affaires, Mark Stroh, following reports that 3 American citizens with ties to the U.S. were conducting covert influence operations in Greenland, a strategically vital Danish territory. According to Denmark's public broadcaster Dr. These individuals allegedly worked to undermine Danish-Greenlandic relations by compiling lists of U.S.-friendly Greenlanders, identifying opponents of the Trump administration, and gathering material to portray Denmark negatively in American media, purportedly to advance U.S. interests in annexing the resource-rich Arctic island. Both Denmark and Greenland have firmly rejected Trump's repeated claims to the territory, emphasizing its non-negotiable status within the Kingdom of Denmark. While the U.S. Embassy in Copenhagen has not commented, Rasmussen called such interference unacceptable, highlighting the strong alliance between Denmark and the U.S. within NATO, yet underscoring the need for mutual respect among allies. Iran has cautiously allowed a team of UN nuclear inspectors from the International Atomic Energy Agency to return to its Bushehr nuclear power plant to oversee fuel replacement, marking the first such visit since Tehran suspended cooperation in July 2025 after Israeli and U.S. airstrikes on its nuclear facilities. This limited step, confirmed by Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, follows diplomatic pressure from European nations urging compliance with nuclear non-proliferation obligations, though no agreement on full inspections has been reached. Critics view Iran's selective cooperation as a sign of continued defiance, especially given its stockpile of 882 pounds of highly enriched uranium, which raises concerns about its nuclear intentions. While Tehran insists its program is peaceful, the partial return of inspectors offers a small hope for restored oversight despite protests from hardliners in Iran's parliament who argue it violates a law banning such cooperation. Israeli forces conducted precise airstrikes on Syrian military targets near Damascus on August 26 and 27, 2025, resulting in the deaths of 6 Syrian soldiers, as reported by Syrian state media and a war monitor. The strikes, which included drone attacks in the Kiswa suburb, targeted military infrastructure, and occurred as Syria and Israel engaged in U.S.-mediated talks to renew a 1974 disengagement agreement and establish new border security measures. The Israeli military's actions follow earlier operations to secure sensitive equipment near Damascus, amid concerns over Syria's new leadership and its ties to Turkey, which Israel accuses of seeking to establish a protectorate. These developments underscore Israel's commitment to regional security and its proactive stance against potential threats, even as diplomatic efforts continue to stabilize the volatile region. Ukraine's foreign ministry has condemned Russia's proposed exit from the Council of Europe's Torture Prevention Treaty, interpreting it as a tacit acknowledgement of war crimes committed during the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. The move comes amid mounting evidence from multiple investigations, including a UN report detailing systematic torture and enforced disappearances by Russian forces, which Ukraine argues Moscow seeks to evade accountability for by abandoning the treaty. Critics of Russia's actions, including Ukrainian officials, assert this decision underscores a pattern of deliberate human rights violations, while Russia denies the allegations, claiming the West ignores Ukraine's own violations. The development highlights escalating tensions and the challenges of enforcing international humanitarian law in the face of geopolitical strife. A grassroots campaign in the Netherlands, sparked by the tragic murder of 17-year-old Lisa from Apkoude, has raised over €500,000 in just 6 days to enhance women's safety on Dutch streets. Titled "We Claim the Night, Let Women Get Home Safely," the initiative is pushing for societal change through public awareness, institutional reform, and support for local safety organizations. The campaign's rapid success reflects widespread public concern about rising violence against women, with organizers emphasizing transparency in fund management, while planning a parliamentary push to address femicide. This effort underscores a growing demand for practical measures to ensure women's security in public spaces, amid a surge in self-defense product sales and community solidarity actions. such as moments of silence in Amsterdam's churches.
You're listening to Underground USA News,